Good night, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you live in an urban area, because after this video you will never look at a tree in the same way. That's right, my friends, tonight we take a look at the Sylvaneth, the dark fairy tale monsters that turn lush forests into your worst nightmare. However, before we start, I'd like to thank Ramakrishna for joining my little channel cult by becoming a member. Also, since a lot of things have changed since the last couple of videos, feedback on the new format would be widely appreciated. But with that out of the way, it is time to really delve into the magical world of Warhammer's haunted forests. Starting off with the most stereotypical concept of the Sylvaneth, the trees that aren't really all that tree-like. While traveling through the mortal realms, you may find yourself walking through a strange section of a forest. The trees simply look wrong. You don't know what it is about them, but they are just wrong. Maybe it is the angular shapes that remind you of trees trimmed by woodcutters. Cutters that would never venture this deep into the woods. Maybe it is how the gnarled bark almost resembles a face, but that could also just be your mind playing tricks on you. Or maybe it is how the branches seem to almost reach out to grab you as your horse passes by them. When passing by these weird looking trees, it is best to avoid them, as they are most likely Dryads in hiding. These creatures were once created to be the natural forest folk that would inhabit and take care of the magical areas around the woods. The centuries of war and bloodshed that followed, however, turned them angry and bitter. Nowadays they are covert assassins, disguising themselves as trees to get close to their targets, rapidly relocating via Wildwoods and slashing their enemies to ribbons with their wooden claws. Unlike most Sylvaneth, Dryads do not have a Lamentary, which for the 40k players is basically a soulstone. Dryads are more natural creatures that can grow in groves and whose soul will return to the soil after their death. This, however, does not mean that they are not part of the magical hive mind structure that organizes the Sylvaneth. This so-called spirit song allows for small armies of Dryads to work together and fight with perfect coordination, allowing entire parts of a forest to come alive together with other more specialized Sylvaneth troops. Within the larger Order Alliance, Dryads are mostly feared, if not outright hated. Their bitter nature and affinity for plant life over fauna makes them fickle allies. A perceived slight, like accidentally damaging a sacred tree, may see your head being turned into fertilizer. Not to mention that with their raspy voice and haunting looks, these wood witches don't do much to ease the nerves of the mortals. Sylvaneth groves are in many ways similar to a garden, but then a garden in which magic and souls are grown into new tree buddies. And just like a garden, every grove needs gardeners to pull out the weeds and to help the flowers blossom. These caretakers are known as Branchwitches. Attuned to the magic of Ghyran, they make sure the soul pods of fallen Sylvaneth are returned to the grove and grown back to life again. They furthermore can use this attunement to obtain premonitions of the future, giving them a role as soothsayers. Finally, you may note the model includes this cool worm creature. Branchwitches have a weak spot for the Fae of the forest and can often be found surrounded by a small army of pets. However, they have a special use for these so-called bitter grubs. These worms are not only potent combatants that strike enemies who come too close, no, after feeding on enough lifeblood, they will start to form a cocoon. This chrysalis will burst and unleash a wave of healing spores that vitalizes the surrounding area. And by the way, if you want to read a really cool story about a branchwitch, you should read The Garden of Mortal Delights by Robert Rath. Then a similar being that I would like to mention is the Branchwraith. However, I must also disclose that this mini was removed from the range during the larger mini-cull of 2nd edition. I suppose I can understand why they removed it, because exactly like the Branchwitch, this creature is a wielder of life magic who tends to the soulpod groves of the Sylvaneth. They however also fulfilled a little bit of a leading role, as they acted as commanders of the Dryads. Like the Dryads, they lacked a Lamentary, but unlike them, they were more focused and magically attuned. Because of this, they worked as a second management line under the Treelords, directing Dryads to fulfill their role within the grove effectively while also assuming a general role in warfare. They were also powerful witches in combat that moved with rapid speed to shred enemies with their talons, or simply obliterated them from a distance with gnarly blasts of eldritch energy. The Kurnoth Hunters form a special breed of Sylvaneth that are larger, stronger, more tactical and more reserved. Yeah, I know, basically Sylvaneth Space Marines. Regardless, these special warriors travel between the various Sylvaneth clades and lend their skills wherever they can make themselves useful. Like wolves, they stalk through the woods in small hunting packs, using their supreme stealth skills to approach their prey unnoticed. They possess an ability to communicate via the ground to other Sylvaneth that even provides them with a raider-like awareness. This makes them excellent scouts that can coordinate an attack before enemies are even aware of their existence. However, do not be fooled by their stealth abilities. These are not just scouts that engage in small skirmishes. They are called hunters for a reason, and when the time comes to fight, they are a sight to behold. Using ballista-sized enchanted bows, man-sized greatswords, or scythes so large they can reap heads like corn cobs. What makes them even scarier is that these are no frenzied zealots like so many other Sylvaneth creatures. Kurnoth Hunters calmly walk into combat without making a sound, obliterate whatever stands in their way, and leave without elaborating any further. Also interesting is that the 2nd edition battle tome notes that they dedicate slain foes to the fallen god Kurnoth. This is omitted in the 3rd edition tome, so it's not important at the moment, but if you're watching this during the 5th edition or something, maybe it matters again, who knows. Talking about the murked god of the hunt, Kurnoth is also known for having the coolest funeral procession since My Chemical Romance launched the Black Parade album. During his death, a creature was born on the battlefield known as Belthanos. In a way, he resembles a Kurnothi hunter, but imbued with an overwhelming amount of life magic. So much life magic in fact, that he is really good at removing that of someone else. Jokes aside, Belthanos believes that it is his task to keep the wild hunt alive to prevent Kurnoth from disappearing forever. He has since roamed Ghyran on a crusade known as the Evergreen Hunt, basically an ever-possessing quest to hunt down whatever Belthanos deems a good prey. To do this, he has been armed with a magical hunting horn that motivates all nearby allies to gang up on the unfortunate victim. Additionally, he has a magical cloak of leaves gifted by the dying Kurnoth and a super-powered stabby stick. Also not unimportant is his Spite mount, a Carnelian Great Spite. This creature brims with life magic to such an extent that flora starts sprouting everywhere the creature has walked. Like a medieval version of Snake, Belthanos uses this phenomenon to surround his prey with thick foliage and vines. Talking about Kurnoth, we also have to make a small detour to Skaeth's Wild Hunt. This is a pretty old underworld warband which features a rare selection of models, namely Kurnothi mortals, centaurs, and satyr people who worship the god of the hunt. They have been sent on a special quest by Alarielle, the objective being to defeat the Cataphrane Curse. This corruption of life magic causes those infected to be reborn every time they die, manifesting itself around sites of bloodshed. The curse causes endless battles where both sides keep on resurrecting, basically forever resetting to the moment before the battle. Skaeth's Wild Hunt has traveled to the Beastgrave in Gur to see if they can put an end to this. And as an added bonus, they will hunt down any Chaos Worshippers that they encounter along the way. Alrighty, and then for something different, the wet dream of every Lord of the Rings fan, a whole bunch of Treelord models. Now, these all come from the same kit, but I will cover them in order of importance. Starting off with the Treelord, and well, what can I say? It is a massive 20 feet tall tree that woke up and chose violence. It is as if a battering ram decided that it was time to take matters into its own hands, or if a tree decided it was time to smoke you. Sure, I can go on about how they are the nobles and leaders of the Sylvaneth, but at the end of the day, Angry Tree covers most of it. Okay, but outside of this, what makes them interesting is that all Treelords are heavily synced with the spirit song of the glade they belong to. Oakenbrow Lords are wise and regal, Ironbarks are basically wooden dwarves, and Harvest Boon are fickle as elves. They act as ambassadors of the collective conscience and as such shape the personality of the glade, especially since they act as leaders and commanders to the other Sylvaneth, who look up to them both figuratively as well as literally. Okay, you might be able to guess this, but when a Treelord becomes very old and powerful, they turn into a Treelord Ancient. But jokes aside, this is not just a promotion that comes with old age. The title of Ancient more emphasizes the incredible amount of life magic that these beings have taken up over the years. This provides them with powers that make the Treelords and Branchwitches seem like charlatans in comparison. For starters, they obtain a perfect memory that allows them to recall every minute detail of every event that they have witnessed, basically turning them into medieval Wikipedia, which allows them to invent incredible tactics and plans based on ancient knowledge other races will have forgotten. Furthermore, their connection to the spirit song is as strong as it could be, which on one hand allows them to vibe check other Sylvaneth and give them newfound energy and motivation. But these leadership powers also come with a cost, as when you gaze into the spirit song also gazes back into you. That is to say, Tree Lords may have the personality of a grove, but Ancients are prone to really showing every quirk and mannerism that the grove might possess. Finally, yes, they are also immensely powerful spellcasters that can summon woods of strangling vines, hordes of angry spites, or deflecting hurricanes. Then, when you are foolish enough to get too close, they again remain literal trees that woke up on the wrong side of the grove. All this power does come with the drawback of being very taxing on their body. So, similar to your grandpa, while awesome, they do need long periods of rest in between their activations. Periods during which they are as catatonic as a normal tree, or your grandpa. So while a grove may have multiple Ancients, it is common to only have 1 or 2 active to keep things running, while the rest is napping away. The most elite variant of the Tree Lord are the spirits of Durthu. These magical beings have been created by Alarielle herself and seem to be imbued by some essence of Durthu from the world that was. Casting lightning bursts of eldritch magic and wielding magical swords the size of a minivan, these monsters lay waste to anything the Everqueen wants to be finite. Alarielle sends these creatures all over the realms to act as her emissaries, and they may help to turn the tide of a particular battle or come to guard a person or a site of particular interest. However, also for diplomatic reasons these creatures can be sent, as their memory and knowledge is still on the level of a Tree Lord. There is also a special elite squad of these spirits called the Sons of Durthu. These were created during Alarielle's first exploration of Ghyran and act as her own personal bodyguard. They were at some point fired for unknown reasons and thereafter scattered all over the realms, so if you want to make a fun story, you can include a sleeping spirit of Durthu that wakes up to help your glade. Regardless, most of them have been reunited with their queen at this point and once again act as her custodian guard. Then onto our next category, which contains all of the part ghost, part tree constructions, as well as some adorably little buggers. Tree-Revenants, which resemble an elven warrior grafted to a wicked tree, form the military proper of the Sylvaneth. It is their job to execute anything that dares to come too close to their sacred groves and woods, patrolling the borders, demarking territorial boundaries, and answering the call whenever a fight breaks out. Furthermore, they are used like special forces that can reclaim lost sites of power in rapid and ferocious fashion. Using the realm roots to rapidly reposition, they can literally appear out of nowhere, ready to slay whomever was dumb enough to steal it in the first place. What really sets the Tree-Revenants apart from the other Sylvaneth forces, however, is that they try to act like the heroic elven warriors of old. In the world that was, the magical forests of the Wood Elves were patrolled by bands of highly skilled Waystalkers and Waywatchers. Silent and deadly, they made sure that interlopers were dispatched in such a spectacular manner that no one else dared to enter their woods again. Like these warriors of legend, the Revenants fight in a flowing, methodical style, making sure every swing looks as impressive as it is deadly, making sure to outmaneuver their enemy to avoid the need for charges, carrying beautiful silken banners, and even chanting poetic verses. This makes them an inspiration to their allies, strokes their ego, but most importantly, tells the enemies that they can butcher them all without breaking a sweat. Opposing the noble grays of the Tree-Revenants are the Spite-Revenants, who are to these stealthy assassins what the Night Lords are to the Raven Guard. As part of the Outcasts, these Sylvaneth have a broken soul disconnected from the sanctioned spirit song. Instead, they have an aura of sadistic hate with whom the other Sylvaneth don't vibe whatsoever. They thus mostly live in isolation, and their whereabouts can usually be spotted by the thorny and poisonous plant life that tends to bloom in the presence of their broken spirit song. Despite them being losers among Sylvaneth kind, these warriors should be feared even more than their traditional counterparts. In battle, they love nothing more than to carve creatures or people apart in showers of gore, dousing themselves in the blood of the enemy and decorating their branches with their guts. If this wasn't spooky enough, their broken spirit song emits such a distressing vibe that nearby creatures already feel a sense of dread before they even enter the battle. They avoid sunlight and thus usually come bursting out of the shadows like monsters from the abyss. Because where the Tree-Revenants moved with grace and fluidity, these beings are jumpy and twitchy, sometimes stalking slowly to the enemy but bursting into erratic velocity when in clawing range. Their terror tactics and erratic nature is sure to cause panic and confusion in whatever regiment they attack, and thus the other Sylvaneth appreciate their usefulness in wartime. Conversely, the Spite-Revenants are naturally drawn to the angry tones present in the spirit song during wartime, basically turning them into a mercenary force that conveniently appears whenever the grove is at war. Originally meant as diplomats to be sent to the leaders of factions from the Great Alliance of Death, fate had something different in store for them. For one reason or another, their soul pods ended up in Shadespire, and only when the Necroquake occurred was enough magic released to allow them to grow out of these pods into a ragtag band of surviving Tree-Revenants. Led by the Thorn Witch Ylthari, they now try to clean their surrounding land of Nagash's taint, going on a quest to restore the land's vitality with their life magic. They hope that by doing so, they will be able to find the many soul pods of their emissary kin that are still missing. Naturally, if they have to butcher some undead that get in the way, they will do so gladly. While not necessarily as powerful nor as respected as the spirit of Durthu, the Arch-Revenants act like special agents to make sure the collective war efforts remain as efficient as possible. Created by Alarielle during a season of war, these creatures were meant to stoke the fires of war in groves all over the realms, encouraging their passions, riling them up, and making sure they were well prepared against whatever faction they were up against. To do so, they were created to be excellent combatants, capable of teleporting via the spirit paths, flying via specially created Zephyr Spites, and wielding magical glaives. They were furthermore made very cunning and given command over smaller spites, which they can use for spying purposes. Whenever they arrived at their destination, they were to lead the war effort, either via brute force if possible, or via guerrilla tactics and sabotage if the enemy had the upper hand. However, while they may have been successful in this purpose, they are disliked by many other Sylvaneth. For starters, their mere presence spreads an aura of impatience and violence, causing otherwise calm groves to rapidly prepare for war, something which the conservative Tree Lords don't always agree with. But moreover, because of their high rank and own impatient nature, they have the social skills of a battering ram, preferring to teleport into the political center of a glade, seizing control and getting to work, instead of going through all of the normally required etiquette and political bickering. Another unit which loves to use Zephyr Spites are the Gossamid Archers. But by the way, these Zephyr Spites are like Kipperin from Hunting, right? No one? Okay, let me explain in that case. Basically, they are magic bugs with 4 extremely powerful wings. Using their limbs, they grasp the elf and then carry them around, practically allowing them to fly. In the case of the Gossamids, they will even drop their elf and charge at the enemy if necessary, buying the elf in question some time to run away. The more interesting creature for the Gossamids, however, is the Quiver Bug. This insect produces arrow-shaped constructs filled with larvae. Similar to the Tyrannid weaponry, this allows the Gossamids to fire bioweapons. Upon impact, the larvae will rapidly depart from the arrowhead into the flesh of the host. Here they will rapidly grow, causing the host to literally explode in a shower of blood and quiverbug hatchlings. These quiverbug hatchlings can then be used to make new Gossamid Archers by growing them into full adult quiverbugs. Naturally, an elven army wouldn't be complete without a form of cavalry, and thus I present the Spiterider Lancers. These warriors have managed to tame a dragon spite, a fast-flying creature with extreme regenerative capabilities. Riding these creatures, they can soar over the battlefield with rapid speed and agility, diving down in cycle charges to stab apart high-priority targets. Taming one of these special creatures is no simple task, however, and in fact only recently has this even become possible for the Sylvaneth. See, these creatures used to be native insects to the magical forests of Bathelloren. Here they nested in the Oak of Ages, and since this magical tree survived into the Age of Sigmar, their eggs were still dormant in the amber of the oak. Alarielle's Rite of Life, which she used to end the Necroquake, has caused these eggs to hatch and thus resulted in a sudden outburst of dragon spites in Ghyran. Still, taming one is not so simple as walking up to one and feeding it a carrot. No, a warrior has to track one down and sing to it via the spirit song. Like a praying mantis, the dragon spite will then decide if this rider is worthy or not. If they are found worthy, they are allowed to ride it, otherwise they'll be torn apart and eaten alive. When successful, the riders can then use life magic to reshape the dragon spite's exoskeleton into a saddle shape and ride them into battle. The Revenant Seekers are a grim variant of the Spiterider Lancers. Instead of acting like cavalry to the standing armies, the task of Revenant Seekers is to retrieve the lamentari of fallen Sylvaneth, even when these are surrounded by or stolen by enemy forces. The Seekers will do everything in their power to obtain these soul stones. Because these lamentari form such a crucial element of the life cycle of the Sylvaneth, most groves have some of these present to make sure as many souls are retrieved as possible. In grim rituals, they can even empower nearby Sylvaneth with the final life energies of these lamentari, providing some extra boost to their vitality as well as strength. Their dark assignment does have some impact on the personality of the Seekers, and by extension also colors their spirit song. Revenant Seekers are surrounded by a melancholic vibe that few Sylvaneth appreciate, but their importance still earns them respect, unlike those of the outcasts. Like the Pied Piper of fable, the Warsong Revenants shape the realms using magical flutes. Like many other new additions to the Sylvaneth range, these creatures were created during the Rite of Life. Unlike the others, however, these Revenants literally carry modes of this spell within them. To put it simply, they act like living miniature versions of the spell, recasting it wherever they go. In order to do so, they carry large magical flutes created from bark splinters of the Oak of Ages. By playing these flutes, especially near the magical ley lines, they vitalize their surroundings. Flowers bloom, trees sprout from the soil, and forest creatures quickly inhabit these new woods. Chaos and other destructive energies are meanwhile wiped away. Naturally, Alarielle was expecting resistance to this endeavor, and thus also granted these beings some defensive capabilities. For starters, like said Pied Piper, the spines of the forest follow their song and will attack anything that tries to stop it. But the thorns, vines and roots of the undergrowth too vibe along and will crush anyone foolish enough to come near. Finally, the song itself is awful to hear for anyone who isn't Sylvaneth. For non-Chaos mortals, it sounds weird and creepy, like a discordant soundtrack of a horror movie, but for those tainted by Chaos, it is the most horrible thing they have ever heard, as it will literally start to shred their tainted souls. This leaves them disturbed and confused, making it easier for other Sylvaneth to take them down. Oh yeah, because of their important task of revitalizing the realms, almost all Sylvaneth respect them and will do anything in their power to help them with their mission. At least that is what the battle tome says, but it also says that the song is beautiful to the ears of the Sylvaneth, so you can say that they like to go on a holy mission, but maybe they just like to vibe to this dope flute concert. Who knows? Then endless spells. Similar to the other factions, the Necroquake also created some new magical reinforcements for the Sylvaneth in the form of endless spells. The first of these being the Glade Worms. These are magical worms that inhabited the realm roots. The energy flux of the Necroquake disturbed them and caused them to also start appearing on the surface. Here, these spites aid the Sylvaneth by tearing apart enemies or even by healing them using their magical rejuvenating breath. Another creature disturbed from their natural habitat is the Skullroot. These carnivorous, tree-like creatures used to only be found in the darkest corners of the forest. Here they waited for prey to come near before capturing them with their tendrils and devouring them whole. Now, however, they use their roots also to move to the battlefield, capturing prey in a more proactive manner. Finally, there are the Spite Swarm Hives. These swarms of magical insects can be called forth by potent life mages, and unlike what you might expect, don't go full-on Devora on the enemy. Instead, they act like meat shields that obscure their allies in clouds of buzzing insects, and meanwhile they also contain healing potions that they can sting into their allies like miniature stimpaks. And then we also have to talk about Wildwoods for a second, because while they aren't necessarily an endless spell, these magical creations form the core of the Sylvaneth combat strategy. See, like how mushrooms sprout from mycelium, the Sylvaneth can grow these magical woods from out of the realm roots. Wherever their war effort goes, they will encourage the realm roots to spread via their life magic, and then allow for the creation of new wildwoods. These magical woods serve multiple purposes. For starters, they allow for teleportation, as most Sylvaneth forces can use these woods to teleport to another wildwood, connected via the realm roots. Another upside is that they are filled with magical spites and plant life, making it very difficult for non-Sylvaneth to navigate, let alone conquer them. So similar to fortresses of other factions, they fulfill a similar defensive role. For the present Sylvaneth, they meanwhile create a pleasant environment to live, grow and recover. On the tabletop, you can also field these guys as a terrain piece, allowing you to heal units and teleport them quickly all over the battlefield. In fact, you will probably need half a dozen to properly play this faction, because similar to the lore, they are rather essential. Second in command amongst the living woods is the Lady of Vines, and no, I'm not talking old people TikTok. The vines are rather literal in this case, and they will strangle you to death if you get close enough. Jokes aside, like the biblical Eve, the lady was created from the sacrificed hand of Alarielle, and as a result almost works like a miniature backup of the Everqueen herself. The lady was created during the summer, and as a result is always blazing with the sun's fury. Unlike the Everqueen herself, whose temperament changes with the seasons, so for whenever Alarielle sinks into her winter depression, the lady is here to pick up the branch. In Alarielle's absence, she is basically considered the highest leader, and thus she can command the wide majority of the Sylvaneth. A smart development, as the Sylvaneth would have been led to ruin during Nurgle's invasion of Ghyran if it wasn't for her. Nurgle's gamer smell almost took down the goddess, but the lady fought on without hesitation, making it so that while Ghyran suffered greatly, Nurgle's forces were never actually capable of killing the Everqueen and all of her followers. Because the lady isn't just a political figure, she's in fact an extremely powerful combatant. For starters, she wields Kurnoth's Wrath, a magical spear created from Alarielle's own spear. It even contains some essence of Kurnoth, the deceased god of the hunt, and the former partner of Alarielle. In addition, she is an extremely powerful life wizard, capable of strangling enemies with her vines, traversing armies through the roots of the realm, or bending the forest to her will. So yeah, I could be mean and summarize her as budget Alarielle, but lore-wise she is quite a big deal. Not to mention that her model is awesome. Another mean lady with an epic model is Drycha Hamadreth. In the world that was, Drycha was a genocidal branchwitch who betrayed Alarielle in a misguided attempt to try and save her forest. As a result of this betrayal, Alarielle had her doubts about regrowing the soul of Drycha after her rebirth. Despite these reservations, she came to the realization that the raw hatred of Drycha could prove crucial for the survival of the Sylvaneth. A series of setbacks eventually convinced her to seek out a location for Drycha's soul plot to grow. Alarielle traveled to a dark and cursed woodland called Hamadreth. In these haunted lands, Drycha would mature into a truly undefeatable malice, or at least that was the idea. In reality, this plan worked even better than expected, as the monster that walked out of the woods was more terrifying than even Alarielle had expected. Her body, a towering gnarly golem of wood and vines, with malevolent sprites infecting every nook and cranny. She has become a dark force of nature that seeks to destroy anyone who endangers her idea of Ghyran, whether that be cultists, beastmen, or stormcast. The spirit song emitted by this dark avatar is twisted and discordant. Unpleasant for normal Sylvaneth, but it does draw in all those broken and casted out by the conventional glades. The Spite-Revenants in particular feel right at home in Drycha's Court of Thorns. Then finally onto the flower that crowns the woodwork of the Sylvaneth, Alarielle the Everqueen. Now, for those familiar to Warhammer Fantasy, all of that might sound suspiciously familiar to the late High Elven Everqueen. And one would be correct in assuming that she is one of the lucky few that managed to survive the end of the world that was. Similar to other fan-favorite elves like Malekith, Tyrion and Teclis, she was found by Sigmar during the Age of Myth and ascended to godhood. Don't expect much to remain of her former self, however, because while she may have lived up to her title by resurrecting like a phoenix, the magic of Ghyran has infused her to the point where she might as well be a different person altogether. In fact, in recent times, the Lumineth and Sylvaneth have very much started to stretch the definition of allies, with clashes over ley lines being a common occurrence. Regardless of her origins, Alarielle nowadays is a goddess of life and nature. Two things that may sound similar but that in reality encompass two entirely different aspects. As a goddess of life, she fills barren land with regrowth, causes crops to flourish and blossom, and can restore purging vitality to even the most tainted of lands. Nature, however, isn't all about poppies and flowers, however. No, in the cycle of life and death, death is almost as important as birth. The old had to be destroyed so the new can blossom. So as much as her aura can give life, the growth she brings can be just as potent at snuffing it out. Thorns may shoot from the ground to strangle anyone nearby, or roots can shatter fortifications in the blink of an eye. Moreover, she has sacrificed one of her arms to attune with the Talon of Dwindling, a massive wooden claw that can rapidly drain the life from anything she points it at. Oh, and also don't forget the Spear of Kurnoth, a magical relic created from the last embers of the dead hunting god. Basically, it works like a custodian spear and can be used to shoot balls of energy, as well as in the more traditional stabby manner. The cyclicality of the seasons too has a large impact on both her and the Sylvaneth race as a whole. Their personality and temperament basically has four modes between which they cycle. During the spring, they may be peaceful and focused on growth, but during the winter cycle, they become bitter and withdrawn, hateful like someone who has read too much Robert Frost. During her more aggressive moods, her mount also comes in handy, because this massive unit is a Wardrop beetle. But don't be fooled by its name, this actually is a forest spirit that can turn into a swarm of protective orbs when needed. It can act as a battering ram to crush whatever stands in her way, and if it does die, Alarielle can recreate it using the soul pod-like soul seed that it contains. However, more relevant perhaps for this video is that she is also the creator and de facto leader of the Sylvaneth race. Originally separated from all the other survivors of the End of Times, Alarielle found herself lost and alone in the forest of Ghyran. Here she began an attempt to return those she lost by regrowing remaining souls into soul pods. Imagine a more useful version of Aeldari soulstones. From these soul pods the Sylvaneth were born, a race of plant people connected to their goddess via a collective conscience known as the Spirit Song. Recognizing her as a powerful and fair being, the forest spirits and mortals of Ghyran also started to follow her soon after. Sigmar arrived and she joined the Pantheon. But of course we cannot have nice things, and the Age of Chaos started. Nurgle's forces destroyed almost all of Ghyran, while her former allies retreated to protect their own assets. At the dawn of the Age of Sigmar, she had started a large war campaign to reconquer the lost territory, to some success. However, only recently, after she enacted the Right of Life, which ended the Necroquake's effects, have the Sylvaneth risen to their true potential. With the wrath of a son, Alarielle and her children now scour all taint from the lands in a merciless campaign to restore the balance of nature. And that wraps up the overview of the Sylvaneth forces, from the lowly Dryad to the big boss lady herself. When fighting the Sylvaneth, one should expect guerrilla-style warfare. Their defenses and attack are both pretty decent, but their real potential comes from the employment of Wildwoods, which allow them to rapidly reposition. Sylvaneth never like to fight fair, instead preferring to surround their opponents while utilizing their surrounding wildlife to the maximum. In addition, a heavy dose of life magic and small armies of magical creatures called spites make them a truly terrifying force. But that's all I got for you today. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, and if you want your faction covered next, feel free to post your faction down below. Then have a nice evening, and I'll see you next time.